Hold on, let me just make sure everything is running. Fuck off, Twitch. Right? Just stop. Stop with the over fucking lays. Fuck off, Twitch. Right? Just stop. Stop with the over fucking lays. Fuck off, Twitch. Just okay. Well, there's a good start telling Twitch to fuck off. There's stuff to talk about today for sure. I just want to get everything kind of organized here. Um, do they have a VOD of this? They do. Okay. Yeah, lots of little things to go over. Let me just try and prepare some talking points. Just pardon me a moment while I get all this together. Blop, blop, blip, blip. Okay. Figure I might as well do prep live as well. Um, okay. So what I'm going to do essentially is I have some talking points generally. And then how I'm going to go about it is just sort of bounce off of those and get going with my thoughts on exactly what's going on. So I think the juicy bit to start off on would be Diablo. So, okay. Oh, that's okay. Whatever. Pardon me. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1, and hello and welcome to episode 49 of the Near Death Experience podcast. I'm your host, Deathclock, as usual. And this episode, there's just actually a lot that's happened in the action RPG world. So I think it was about time for me to get back on track and get a new episode out because, like I said, it's been a long time and releases have happened and there's just, a lot of things to catch up on at this point. When before this point, I don't think there was necessarily a lot for me to get into an episode. So two main topics in the episode are going to be Path of Exile and Diablo. I'm going to start with Diablo because that's yet unreleased and there's a lot of opinions that are coming through from the community that I figured were there, but just recently they're starting to be more confirmed, I guess is the best way to put it. So first things first, Diablo 4. I didn't get to watch the Game Awards because I was working and there was just a lot of stuff happening, but there they did a big introduction, gave a nice little trailer. I didn't get to see that Lilith and Inarius trailer until later, but I would suggest checking it out. It's pretty cool. But beyond that, Blizzard also did a sort of like live stream Q&A with the community, and there was a lot of feedback that came out of it, but very little information. And really, that's kind of what I want to focus on here. So in terms of the Q&A, there wasn't that much Q&A, and the organizers didn't really seem to leverage the live format very much. I saw that a lot in feedback and saw a lot of complaints about content. I actually caught up with it a little late, but really they used the opportunity not to really pump up the game with the dev and core updates kind of thing. They just sort of skirted around a lot of stuff, which I didn't really agree with or really resonate with, because when you have a release date scheduled, you're on pre-purchase, I should think there would be some like things to talk about, especially in that area with systems coming up and all that fun stuff. But what I caught was only a discussion about the codex that they're going to be putting in the game. And essentially what this thing is supposed to do is allow you to take a sort of legendary item. There's 2 tiers. So there's uniques above that, which are rarer. And that's where they're going to start pulling the nostalgia strings, because they said things like Mage Fist and Grandfather will be back. But this is sort of a lower tier that has an extra power, which I can only kind of equate to like an Eldritch Implicit in Path of Exile that lets you fire like extra projectiles, for example. So there's a risk reward kind of interplay there. But there wasn't that much content outside of that to explain what the game is, what we'll be encountering. A lot of people felt that there was not really enough to drive that, and I agree. Even from the point that I came in, for something that was supposed to be a live Q&A, there was surprisingly little Q&A. They didn't really leverage what people were talking about in chat. They didn't use any polling features. They didn't, do a lot of things that could have made it a lot more interactive and a lot more useful in terms of what they were trying to do. But it felt like the sort of like company interpretation of a live stream, like, oh, we're here to present things. Hold on, let me read my cue card. Yes, we're here to talk about this and that. And by the way, we're doing this. Like, these are all talented people, but like when even the game director kind of stumbles a few times over some of the content, or people are talking amongst themselves rather than to the audience, it comes off a little bit, how should I put this? Unprepared and just, I guess, like a little too showy. Like they were trying to be performative about it without giving that much or any information about the product itself. A lot of the end of the stream revolved around, here's a sneak peek of our collector's set, and that's something I'm going to touch on in a moment too. And by the way, here's some questions from our community, of which there were only a couple. And on that collector's edition, there were a lot of memes about that, because Blizzard is actually intending to release this collector's edition as just an extra box of goodies from the gear store without an actual copy of the game. So in the past, if you bought a collector's edition and it was like $150, let's say, what you would get is a copy of the game, some art books, stuff like that, maybe a figure. But in this case, the game itself starts at $60 or $70 US. For me, it started around $89.99, and it was expensive. And I got the base edition, but like it makes you kind of wonder that, why do you want around what could be $200 for a game, and half of that was, buying the game itself, and then the other half of it was just not even getting a physical copy of like a disc or something to hold on to and say like, hey, yeah, I have a, factory sealed unwrapped version of Diablo 4 on my shelf kind of thing. Not even. So I don't understand the whole vibe around that. It just seems like an obvious marketing thing to include a copy of the game with that sort of stuff. I would have considered buying it if that were the case, but unlikely. I didn't. It's expensive anyway. It's Canada. We pay extra for things, and we're just used to it. So, again, that's not the route I ended up going. In terms of the actual content of the game, they sort of just didn't really go into it at all. There were a few times where they said, oh, we covered this back in an update. Okay, so, how has that system progressed since that update? What has changed that would, get me pumped for the progression of this system, rather than, yeah, we talked about this back then, and here's a little teaser. I personally feel that Blizzard is a little too controlled with their information. It's like they think they're being communicative, but when you are the ones that are gatekeeping all of the context around what that comes with, like you're the holder of the product and you think you're being cheeky by saying, okay, well, this is going to be a feature. No one's going to get that. Like it just doesn't land well when you think you're being cheeky, but you're really the beholder of all of this context that's literally missing from the narrative. So, instead of people being like, yeah, that's cool, it's like, okay, and like, I just, again, didn't really feel that the format was used constructively at all. There were some glitches, which are fine. I'm not going to knock them for that. It is what it is on that front. But again, if you're going to spend about an hour in a Q&A session where Q&A was maybe, 10 minutes, don't call it that. Just it just doesn't make sense. I haven't been really the kindest towards Blizzard in a very long time. As a group of people, I sincerely hope everything goes well for them. But, in terms of the product, we haven't seen anything good since, I don't know, Reaper of Souls release. When, that's when I would argue that things started to kind of turn around. And all of these little things started coming out of Diablo in terms of that experimentation. And I've said this before, I thought Diablo 3 was really just a big beta test after that point. There were so many features that made it and were removed. And, it brings up another point as well, where they said they had a lot of learnings from the other franchises. But, again, that's something else I don't really buy, because, again, if you're the holder of all of that context and you want to please an audience, but you haven't gotten anything from the audience as to what they feel is important, now you're cherry picking things that you think they might feel are important, but aren't necessarily. So they talked about Diablo 1 and saying, okay, well, it established this vibe. And it's like, correct. But there was also a thing you're missing about that game, because it allowed, complete usability of any weapon between any class. Like, you could do whatever the hell you wanted, given you had enough stats. Diablo 2 was also about that sort of interoperability. It was like, that's where these weird builds started coming out, like Bear Sorks, and, as a very good example of just the interplay of the types of things you could do, where Diablo 3 just came in with a decent combat system, but didn't have any of the vibe. It didn't have any of the interplay with fun builds you could cobble together. It focused way too much on uniques and sets, because there was no way to in Diablo 3 really make gear that was your own. It was just this fake sort of crafting system where you could reroll stats and maybe craft a weapon, which was okay, I'm gonna highlight craft an axe and click the button and just wait for RNG. Not a Path of Exile style crafting, or a Diablo 2 style of crafting where you find a base. You might say, okay, well, I want to make a rune word out of this. I'll go and do that. Or if you want to re-roll an amulet into a different type of amulet, that sort of thing just is missing from Diablo in general. And I really wish they would have taken that kind of lesson from the other franchises. And that's, again, why I'm hesitant about Diablo 4. I think a lot of the good things that will come out of it are things like the tech, the playability. I think the new approach to the story is good, but I don't think a lot of the endgame systems are informed enough by everything else happening and or by the audience to really land in a proper way. So I've always thought that the Diablo 4 hype is very, very restrained. It doesn't feel as outward as, waiting on Diablo 3. Everyone's going to love it. Everyone's just going to hop on this and buy it. That vibe is gone now. Like, we haven't been waiting as long. We all feel that D3 in the end was a flop. And, personally, having spent so much time on it, I would agree that it's basically just a silly arcade version of Diablo, where you go around and it is just like the easiest thing in the world. You get some pieces together and the problem is that it demands your time to do well. And that is directly correlated to your power in that game. There's no real like spiky reward loop where you might find something amazing. Mainly because time is the alternative to that. And I've spoken about that at length. So really, I'm going to put that one to bed. But again, how can you say you learned a lesson when, you're not telling us what those lessons are? You're not taking our feedback on what those lessons should have been because it was all your perspective and your context. And like, how does that really make a better game? Like, and pardon my language, but it could be shit. Like, if I log in and say, okay, well, this open world is amazing, but these areas are dropping nothing for me, or I start interacting with whatever their crafting system is because they haven't really told us anything. Again, detriment to the whole thing in general. If I don't know what I'm about to get to, how can I really have like formative expectations about what class I'm going to choose, which spec I might want to do, and that whole like lessons thing kind of culminates in the idea that they were allowing classes to start with a skill, and they didn't actually add a basic attack until near the end of development, which just blows my fucking mind. Like, how do you not have a basic attack and a sort of path away from it? D2 had a basic attack. You could use your staff or weapon at any class without anything else. Path of Exile has a basic attack. You start with that. It gives you, as a sorcerer, as a witch, for example, Fireball later, after you kill the first enemy. So what they're saying is, we want to give you autonomy without trying to say that, this first skill is the be all end all, but like, what were you thinking that was the case? Like, who tested this and who gave you that feedback? And again, that's my ultimate biggest frustration about this company, is that they're so locked within themselves that their games are going to be shit until they break out of it, is really what it feels like to me. Like, it's just going to not be good until they start realizing that the, games as a service model, especially, doesn't come from within your small friggin' team of like 6 people. It comes from the masses who tell you their feedback. You filter it through the lens of your team and what makes sense to the game, and then you implement what makes sense. You don't cave to the pressure and say, okay, well, we'll make this easier because you said so. It should be, the game is going in this direction. We've gotten feedback. Some of it jives with our aims, but some of it doesn't. So let's implement X, Y, and here's why we did it. And, it just results in a much more tangible and meaningful type of interaction. And I really want Blizzard to get that message. So like, if anyone's listening from there, that this is the main takeaway. I think this is what really a lot of people have not been able to articulate recently, is just that there's no loop. There's no involvement other than us hearing that a lesson was learned and then seeing that the outcome was literally just a guess at, what the audience perceived the outcome should be based on what you thought that was, I guess. I mean, it's an awkward way of putting it, but that is really it. So, again, I own Diablo. I'll admit it. I thought it was way too fucking expensive. They should not be charging that much for it, but at the same time, I do want to try it, but I still remain hesitant. There is only like a small chance I'll actually take the beta window, because the base edition comes with that. And I'm not even going to talk about the microtransactions that it comes with, because I don't feel that they're really relevant to the game. It's just a tacky little add-on. Like, why? There are certain other aspects of the game that bother me as well, and that more revolves around stuff like the Battle Pass, which, it irks me that you're charging this much for a game and then you're going to expect more out of me later. I'm like, the standpoint of, oh, we have all these microtransactions. Do you want to spend another $20? No. The only reason I spend money on Path of Exile is because they're supported through their supporter packs. Like, I put thousands of hours into this game and I want to support it. I feel that it's completely justified from my perspective to say, okay, you know what? $30, here you go for a supporter pack. Or like the Curex Vault Pass. All cosmetic, but again, the end is more justified because they're offering it as an option for progress you can get in the game, and neither game is selling power. So again, just trying to separate that. But, it's that give and take. If you're going to say you're going to go on a box model, go with the box model and leave it that way. I started talking about Path of Exile, so what I'm going to do is put the Diablo topic to rest and get right into PoE. So, the 3.2 League has started. It's called Forbidden Sanctum. Basically, I haven't played too much of it, but you go into an encounter. You get to start from an origin room and sort of select your own adventure. You get to see a room or two ahead, and you get to select your path through like however long the dungeon is, and then at the end of it is a boss. I haven't gotten to that point yet. If you happen to fail the Sanctum encounter, it's not a death, it's just a fail. You basically have a certain amount of resolve, and if you run out of that resolve, your character is out of it, your board gets reset, and you're back to the beginning. As far as I've seen, within that mechanic, there's things called relics. They seem to be very important. I haven't found too many of them yet, but if and when I do, I'll definitely do some more content around that. So Sanctum is fine. There was a point that came up to me that was pretty relevant. I'll see if I remember it. So, the Atlas tree for passives has changed a lot. Haven't added any more in terms of like synthesis that I've seen, but they're allowing you to really spec hard into certain things. Oh, I remember now. They're allowing you to really spec hard into whatever type of mechanic you want, except synthesis, apparently. And those nodes have been great. And the point I really wanted to touch on is Arch Nemesis. So to say that it's gone is kind of a lie. The mods themselves and the system as we knew it, as like the original Build-A-Bear kind of mod that we had when it came out, and how everything would stack before, that particular aspect of Arch Nemesis is gone. But the problem is all of the modifiers have been split out into single modifiers. So all of the stuff like, Magma Barrier isn't the Magma Barrier plus the volatiles plus some fire resist. There's a mob that can just give you the volatiles. Or like with Mana Siphoner, there's a monster with a giant aura that still siphons your mana and kills you if you can't move fast enough away from it. So in terms of removing Arch Nemesis, they kind of did, but I would say that's a bit of a lie at this point. A lot of the annoying mods are still there. They're a little bit easier to manage in terms of the mobs that you fight. The encounters are definitely a little easier to deal with, but the difficulty of some of them is still not what I would call in line with what you would expect from like a normal rare encounter, because we're not actually back at a form that resembles the previous rare system. We're kind of like, GGG is being stubborn and saying, okay, well, we didn't want to really remove it. We liked some of these things and we want to keep them in, and just, continue being stubborn with these affixes that make it feel like you're fighting a mini boss. Like, I still don't think that it's productive to have a mob that's like harder than a quest boss, like the Black Star, for example, that just continually can come and just, PK you over and over again, or like Infinite Hunger. Again, same PK potential, but like, why does it exist? I still feel that's pretty frustrating. And I also don't really understand some of the reward scaling that has come with these changes. It seems like what they did with the Flask reward scaling was turn it into experience. So whenever you defeat some of these mobs, it just pumps up your overall gem experience, and people have been seeing their gems pop to the next level like instantly. And, again, we don't really have a clear idea as to why. Sorry, I just had to respond to a message. But anyway, that's my feel about it. I do think there are some good builds. Oh, focus. There's some good builds, and I personally chose one that doesn't start feeling good until you have more endgame gear. That's on me. But I, instead made an alt, found the Polaric Devastation Ring after I defeated Black Star, which is great. It's a 6 divine item apparently now. But I really needed it to enable my build rather than go through the multi-modding process for my bow. I would say that is about it. Path of Exile still has a long way to go, and I think these days we're kind of in a state where Diablo 3 was, where we're just in this beta test until the next thing. And I think grinding your games is in a much better position to learn more valuable lessons. But I do think they really need to break this like loop of stubbornness and really change how they deal with feedback and what their sentiments are towards what's best for the game. Because, community frustration can definitely boil over. And I'm not saying pay attention to Reddit, because that's just an echo chamber. Rarely do they have a very good point that isn't, just screaming for no reason. So, I try to give some background to what I say. I try to back it up and say, well, this is why. And that I believe is why. I'm also hoping that the sort of loot goblin meta from last season doesn't result again because of this idea that there should be scaling in terms of the rewards and what you get. So I hope the magic find color thing has been put to rest. I do think there are still a lot of other things about the game that do need to be improved. Harvest, for example, is still kind of awkward. I mean, why there's a node to have a chance to double the amount of life force that drops, but why wouldn't that just be inherent to the system? Because that is a crafting system that a lot of people interact with that has been made extremely weak by multiple changes over time. Like, I'm not saying we should have full control over harvest, but I am saying that we should have life force like we get rogues markers. Like, it should be that common where, you can do a harvest and potentially have 50,000 of, that particular quantity of material, but still be missing that little, like, one extra blossom from the boss or whatever to do the endgame crafting, because that still has a long tail to get to, right? You have to spec into those rogue marker nodes to have more of a chance to see a smuggler's stash, but Harvest doesn't have that yet. There were a lot of things that came out of much more productive Atlas passives from 319 to 320, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I don't think I'm the only one who kind of feels that there's a bit of a transition going on here, especially from, the current Path of Exile to whatever 2 ends up being. But I would say that's about it. A lot of the aspects of the game have definitely improved, but it would have been good to actually, take a good look at what these Arch Nemesis mods were and really get into their impact rather than just, implementing a new system and hoping. Especially when, the mods themselves haven't, to my knowledge, really changed that much. I think there could have been a lot more work done in that vein. Anyway, I hope I gave enough information. It's been good to kind of catch up. I do want to say that, hopefully as Diablo picks up, I'll have more to chat about, but, with how Blizzard doesn't communicate, it's hard for me to have something to say about Diablo 4 when all we get is, especially for me and a lot of other content creators, is probably like 5 minutes of content every few months. It just doesn't, it doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. Anyway, for the time being, Path of Exile is going to be my game until Diablo 4 comes in and says otherwise. Yeah. So that is honestly it for me. I think any more time would just be unproductive rambling. So tell me what you think. Follow at all the social links below. I have a Patreon. It will be linked in the YouTube description. It's $1 a month, and that helps support all of the little costs that I have for the podcast and nothing else. Subscribe to YouTube, follow on Twitch if you want. I do live broadcasts of all of my podcast episodes, and if anything is unreleased, I make that available to patrons as well. So definitely check that out. But yeah, just as a closing remark, I hope Diablo 4 is good. If you're playing Path of Exile, hope you're having fun with the League. Let me know any of your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you later. Peace. Okay. That's good. That's good. All right. I'm gonna hop off stream. I have a few things to get done to get the episode up on all the platforms. So I will be doing that shortly. And yeah, thanks for